Today on Twin Cam, we're going to be pumping up my little Melvin's Hydragas suspension. So in this video, I'm not going to be going into the history or the engineering of Hydrolastic and Hydragas. We're just going to be actually pumping up the system. And the reason I'm making this video is because it's one of the things that a lot of people shy away from a bit with these cars. They treat this kind of fluid suspension as a bit of a dark art and something that shouldn't be messed with, or that's really unreliable and generally should be avoided. In fact, there are a lot of people that buy Metros, for example, and immediately ask owners groups, how do I convert it to coil springs? And the answer is always, why would you? But there are a lot of people that really don't understand how this system works and what pumping it up actually does. So first, we do need a little tiny crash course, and in this case I'm just going to be talking about Hydragas in particular. So the system has two halves. One half is the hydrolastic fluid that we'll actually be pumping up today, and the other half is nitrogen gas. That's how you get the Hydragas name. The fluid does the damping and also controls the ride height, which is why if you let all the fluid out, the car drops to the ground. But as it controls the damping, if you drop all the fluid out, you're effectively driving around with knackered dampers. So you want to keep the ride height up, at least to something approaching the factory specification. The gas half you cannot adjust from home. The gas does the springing, so if your suspension is rock hard but it's at the correct ride height, then you need to go to a professional, of which there are a few about. But if your suspension is just low, then you'll need to get yourself one of these. Yes, it is essentially a pressure testing kit, but it has a Schrader valve on the end of it. So this has been converted effectively to pump up Hydragas suspension. Now, as these cars age, the nitrogen gas does leave the system. So any car, no matter how well it's been maintained, how low the miles are, that gas will have escaped, or at least some of it. Little Melvin here seems to have quite a lot of his gas still left, but I know similar cars of similar mileage and similar age that have rock hard suspensions, and that's not a good thing. So if you're in that situation, then you want to go to a professional, as I've said. This today is just about changing the ride height and effectively restoring the damping, but any of these cars really should be regassed at some point, so I will need to go and visit a professional to get the gas done at some point. But the system is pretty reliable, it does just sink after a while. But pumping it up is something that so many people shy away from, because all of the Haynes manuals, for example, all tell you to not bother and to go to a Rover dealer. That's easier said than done, obviously, nowadays. But it's actually not very hard at all to pump up the suspension. You just need to know what you're doing and be quite precise with it. So you'll need that pump that I've already talked about. You will need an 18mm spanner just to tighten up the valve on the suspension itself. And you'll also need hydrolastic suspension fluid, of course. Now, some people seem to think that this is just water. Of course, it isn't. If you put water in, you'll wreck it. This is water-based, and some people have quite successfully used antifreeze as a substitute for this stuff if they really need to, because it has anti-corrosive properties. But this stuff is very readily available, so there's no reason not to use this when this is the proper stuff. You can also make this stuff at home if you are happy doing a little bit of chemistry, but realistically, just buy a bottle of that and you'll save yourselves loads of problems. So let's get into actually doing it. So we're down at the back of this little Metro here. Now, all the different Hydragas cars have different places for where their little suspension valves are. But on the Metro, at least the K-Series Metro, the two valves are just underneath the rear end, close to the rear wheels, and you'll be able to see the Hydragas displacer itself, and you'll be able to see the valve with a little dust cap on it. Now, all Hydragas cars, apart from A-Series Metros, so that's Austin and MG Metros, have the suspension linked front to back. So each side is independent of each other, but the front left wheel is connected to the front rear wheel, and vice versa on the right-hand side. So there are only two valves on this car, they're both at the back. And it's that reason that gives K-Series Metros a kind of drag car stance, so the front sits lower than the back, because of course you've got the weight of the engine. On an A-Series Metro, the two front units are independent and the two rear units are linked side to side. That was apparently to save costs, but it really wasn't very effective, and that's why they switched to the correct way of doing things for the K-Series. Now, I will leave you a link in the description to a website which highlights all the technical information you'll need for pumping up your suspension, including where the valves are on your particular British Leyland car. But as I said with the Metro, they are just here at the back. For example, a Maxi actually has them on the boot floor. You've actually got to open the boot in order to pump the suspension up. And A-Series Metros have one valve for the rear suspension, as you'd expect, which is in front of one of the rear wheels, and the two front ones are under the bonnet. But again, I'll send you the link to that website in the description, and so you'll be able to find out for yourself. The other thing you'll be able to find out there is the actual ride height your car should be. For a K-Series Metro like this, it should be 341 millimeters as measured from the front hub to the wheel arch. Now, that measurement is taken from the front on each side, and before you start doing this, you want to shake the car about a bit. And what I mean by that is kind of to wake the suspension up. If you leave a Hydragas equipped car stationary for 3 months, for example, you'll come back to it and the suspension will be almost on the floor. But if you then take it out for a 30-mile jaunt, the car will be sat right up in the air again. The suspension reacts to the road conditions and what's going on, and it kind of stiffens up and raises the ride height as a response. Now, I'm saying this in the simplest terms possible. I'm completely oversimplifying this, but you want to pull the car backwards and forwards and shake it and rock it up and down so that the suspension rises up and wakes up, or you could just go out for a couple of miles drive. But I've just done that to this car, and when I went back around to the front end after I'd done it from the back, you can see the front end sits considerably higher. And you need to do that to make sure that the ride height is correct once you've finished, because a number of people pump up their cars and then take them out for a drive and they come back and they're sat up in the gods. The wheel arch gap is almost as big as the road wheel itself, which is a bit ridiculous. So once you've done that, like I've done with this, we can actually get to connecting the pump to the car. So as I said, the two valves on a Metro are down at the back, and they are just like tyre valves, so they should have little plastic caps on them, although I think from the factory these cars actually came with metal caps. If your car still has the metal caps, I'd get rid of them and replace them with these, because of course metal caps can corrode onto the valves, so you might be in a little bit of trouble trying to get the caps off, but once you have, put plastic ones back on. So I'll put this in my pocket just to save it, and so now we have the valve open, ready to pump up. As I said, this is effectively a pressure tester, so it's not very complicated, but before we start we need to do a few things. So this here is the Schrader valve that actually goes onto your suspension, and it has on the back of it here, I hope you can see this, it has a little T-bar that you can turn in and out. So you want to make sure that's turned completely out to start with. And then we want to make sure that the actual reservoir itself is completely clean, because anything that's in here is going to go in your suspension, so you do not want rubbish in here. I should just say, because I've completely forgotten to mention it so far, that these are available for about 90 quid or something like that. You can buy much cheaper ones that are almost like a grease gun with a Schrader valve on the end, but they're not quite as precise as these. So if you do want to get a pump, I'd get one that looks something like this. Anything that looks a bit like this with a proper Schrader valve on the end of it should be good. You can also buy ones that have a vacuum facility that you can attach to an airline, and that way you can completely evacuate the suspension of all the air before you start putting the fluid in. And that's something we want to be really careful of out here. We want to make sure that we do not get any air into the fluid half of the system, because that's bad news. So we're going to make sure first that this line has no air in it. So we need to open the hydrolastic fluid, and be warned, because this stuff absolutely stinks and your hands will smell of it for days afterwards, but that's something we're going to have to live with. Now we'll throw a fair bit of this fluid in so that we definitely have enough fluid to actually pump the suspension up, and I'm trying not to get it everywhere because you don't want to get this stuff everywhere. It is horrific. So now the reservoir has quite a bit of fluid in it, and we can shove that off to the side because we shouldn't need it again. Now the pump itself has a pressure gauge on it, so you can actually see the pressure inside your system, and it also has a little bleed screw. this is all standard pressure testing stuff, but it's important in order to make sure that the suspension is healthy and to make sure that you don't get any air in the system. So now I need to connect this to the system, and this is where you need to be careful. It's also where I'm going to disappear under the car and you're not going to be able to see what I'm doing because, well, it's hard to film while I'm trying to do something. But you want to screw the Schrader valve on to the actual valve itself and make sure it's tight, and then your 18mm spanner comes in just to nip it up a little bit. Now, after a bit of gnashing of teeth and quite a lot of swearing, I've managed to get the valve on. It can be a little bit tricky because there isn't so much space in there to actually get it on, and you need to get it dead square on the valve in order to get it on, and then to nip it up with a spanner. This spanner's a bit too big, there's not very much room, so I'm hoping I've got it on tight enough. So the little T-bar on the actual Schrader valve itself should be turned out. You should have done that before you put it on, and just make sure that the fluid, of course, was getting through. I should have mentioned those things, but I assume you're not doing it along with the video the first time you watch it. So now we actually need to get into the suspension, so we need to turn that T-bar around clockwise and hope it doesn't explode. Now, again, compromising camera angle, but this is the exciting bit because now that I've gone into the system, the car is just sunk ever so slightly and we're getting a pressure reading here. So my suspension pressure at the moment, as we speak, is 250 psi. That's why you want to make sure that that valve is on there properly and you don't go straight into the system with the T-bar open straight away. You don't want to get hit by 250 psi's worth of hydrolastic fluid because, as I said, it stinks. So now we're actually into the system. We can, if I just try to get the pipe out of the way as best I can at least, might just hold it, we have this little bleed valve, and now we want to make sure to expel all the air we can out of the system. So if we just turn this, you see the car is sinking down. See that? You see the car sinking down? It's very, very cool to watch, but then I tighten it back up and we're now down to just under 200. So hopefully we've got all the air out, at least it sounds like we have. Let's just make sure. Yep, all the air is definitely out of that. So now we can actually start pumping it back up. So hopefully now that we start pumping it back up, you'll be able to see the suspension rise every time I actually pump this up. So here we go. So, little dweeb arms here can't quite keep up, but now we've got 400 psi according to this gauge, so let's actually go and check the ride height. Again, the camera angle is probably going to be the same. In fact, I'm just going to put it up a little bit so you can see me at that front wheel as we measure. If you remember, we want 341 millimeters, so let's actually have a look. We are at just over 310, so we still need to go a fair old way. This car was really, really low. In fact, the tyres were tucking into the arches, but it's not as if these things sink overnight. It is, I think it's about 2.5 years since I last pumped this suspension up, and which is when I learned how to do this. Obviously, you can tell I've probably done this before. So they do sink gradually, but it seemed to start sinking more and more the longer I left it, so here we go. We now have 400 psi in it. I think the standard is about 450 psi, but that's not a scientific thing because the science we want here is the ride height. That's what Rover quote. So let's keep pumping. So we're now at 450. Let's go and measure again. Now, very good news. We are just about perfect, about 340. Rover do say that plus or minus 10 millimeters either way is fine. And I should also mention that that figure is quoted at 17 degrees C. So the hotter it gets, the higher the suspension sits, the colder it gets, the lower it sits. So tonight it's about 15, 16 degrees. So it's not that far off the 17 Rover quote those figures on. So now we need to actually disconnect the pump from the system. And one thing we have to remember here is that each side affects the other. So we're disconnecting from this side at virtually a perfect 340 millimeters of ride height at the front hub. But when we do the other side, this side will probably change, might go up a bit. So you might need to come back to this side and adjust them just to make sure that the car is level rather than sitting completely lopsided. And for me, that's the most important thing, is getting it sitting right, because anyone looks at it and sees that it's wrong, that doesn't own a Hydragas car, thinks, huh, Hydrolastic doing its thing. So we just need to make sure it's right. So I'm going to disconnect this now. And the way we do that is just to unscrew the little T connection here, then we can bleed all the fluid back into the reservoir that's in the pipe, and then we can safely disconnect it. You don't want to just rush about this and just start unscrewing it without doing the T-bar, because of course it's now at 450 psi, which is a bit much. So we're undoing the connection between the car and the pump here, so the car will again sit on its own. So there we go. It is disconnected, and now we should be able to, without the car sinking down, release all the fluid back into the pump. So there we are, and the car has stayed where it is. I'm just going to give you a shot now, if I bring you with me on the tripod, of how the car's sitting, because you'll be able to see if I just put you in the centre. The car is significantly higher on this side than it is on that side. And I have left this too long. I should have pumped it up sooner, but that's the difference it makes. And so you imagine you've got, I mean, I'm oversimplifying again because Hydragas doesn't work in the same way as a traditional coil spring suspension does, but you've got all that extra suspension travel now waiting for you, and that much more damping, especially, that's in particular what this is giving you. It's giving you much stiffer damping. So previously my car would bounce horrifically over certain terrains, and now it won't do that. It'll remain much more stable on the road, and of course that's what we want. So we're just going to go through all the same process again while doing the other side. After having disconnected it from the other side, I've not really got any of the fluid really anywhere at all. I've got a couple of drops on the driveway, that's it, and none at all on my hands, which is a big difference from the last time I did this, when it kind of went everywhere and the smell stayed on my hands for days afterwards. So it shows that you can do this without making a mess. You just got to be careful about it, not rush it really, as I probably did last time. So now, just to reiterate again, as I turn the thing around to bring it as close to the camera as I can, the Schrader valve itself, you want to make sure before you put it on that the T-bar here that actually enters into the Hydragas system is turned all the way out. That way, when you start screwing this onto the valve, you don't get a massive squirt of hydrolastic fluid everywhere. So let's go on this side. So now, after yet a little bit more trying to work around the car and the fact that it's quite low and a slightly oversized spanner, it's now connected back to the car on this side. So before we do anything on that end, we need to just make sure that it's not connected. Make sure everything's connected. That's okay, because that doesn't want to go down, because there is air in this line and we don't want to be trying to force anything against it. So now we can get back into the suspension by turning this T-bar. And there we go. We are now in, and the pressure reading is showing just over 300 psi. So it's a bit higher than that side, but the car was just ever so slightly lopsided. You couldn't really tell unless it was on a perfectly flat surface and you looked at it from a certain angle quite low down, but it was slightly cockeyed. So now we will use this valve on the pump itself to just let all the air out. Make sure that there's absolutely no air in that at all. And you see the car is coming down on this side. So you see, we're all out of air now, but I've taken it down a little bit more just for dramatic effect. And if we come here, let me just turn the screen around, you can see now it is dramatically lower on that side of the car as I've really let it down. So now we need to pump it back up again. So this side is now at the perfect height, 341 millimeters. On the other side, we're about 345, so just ever so slightly over. Instead of disconnecting from this side and bringing that side down slightly, I'm just going to give an extra half a pump on this side, just to make it absolutely level. So there we go, that is the suspension all pumped up. All that's left to do now, just before I completely lose the light, because I'm recording this at about 9:30 at night. May have been a bad decision that, but we roll. Just going to disconnect this system, and then we'll be good to actually look at the car and realise that I might have pumped it up a little bit too much, just for personal taste, because the arch gap on Hydragas cars, once they're actually pumped up to height, is absolutely huge. But, you know, I would rather have the big arch gap and a good, you know, properly functioning suspension, rather than have it looking cool and low to the ground, but it handle like something I don't want to say on YouTube. So, let's actually disconnect it. So now I'm disconnected from the system, I can put all this fluid very carefully back into that bottle, because the fluid that came out the car was really, really clean, which is a good sign for the health of the system, that there's no rust floating about in the fluid section. So all this that's left in here can be reused, which is great. The suspension is now level, which is great. I didn't want to be going back and forth trying to get it absolutely level, so level and higher is good enough for me. But we are just about on 340 millimeters, which is just a millimeter short of the standard Rover spec for these. So I'm perfectly happy, and the suspension should be a lot better. Because of the time of day and the fact that it's been raining today, and the fact that this car is very, very clean and is ready to go to Festival of the Unexceptional tomorrow, I'm not going to go and drive it for you, but my suspension really could do with reconditioning anyway. As I said previously, the gas half of these systems cannot be replenished just at home like I am, and so you need to take it to a specialist, and at the moment I can't do that, just for financial reasons really. So I can't give you a real overview of what Hydragas suspension is meant to be like, but what I can tell you is that this is going to be a damn sight better than it was before. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, please do click like and even subscribe to TwinCam as well if you're feeling really generous. And I'll have more videos coming along soon.